Welcome to Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg. We're here to explore the imposter syndrome that haunts creatives, delving into how it affects their lives and work. Join us as we chat with authors and artists about creativity, self-doubt, featuring imposter characters in their stories, and the occasional imposter who pops up in their day-to-day lives.
Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Nishita Parekh to the show. Nishita was born and raised in Mumbai and now lives in Texas with her husband and toddler. She is a software programmer, but a writer at heart, and loves writing about her experiences as a woman and an immigrant. She's an active member of the International Thriller Writers, Crime Writers of Color, and Sisters in Crime, and is a hashtag RevPit contest winner. The Night of the Storm is her first novel. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Excited to talk to you guys today.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we with you.
And we are publishing siblings. We share the wonderful publisher Dutton, which is part of the Penguin Random House umbrella. And that was not the reason why we wanted to have you on the show, but it's always nice to, speak with other authors who've had kind of a similar publishing experience. So we can definitely get into that. But, my burning question is definitely, I would have to say, I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, Nishita is the first person who's come on our show that started out in software and then went into writing.
I am pretty sure about that as well. Yes, which fascinates me. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you'll have to tell us how you got from A to B.
Right. So I've always been into books as a child. My parents would take me off to libraries during summer vacations. That was probably so that I wouldn't bother them so much now that I think about it as a parent.
Yeah.
But I grew up with a love of reading. And when the time came to pick a career, my first choice was to go something writing adjacent like journalism or, doing this author thing. But then my dad was like, whoa, whoa, let's think this through.
Uh-huh.
Can you get a stable job first and then follow your dreams? So that's how I ended up going into technology. But the love of writing was still there. So in my spare time, I would be writing short stories whenever I could. I tried to get my writing as much as possible out there, always trying to enter writing contests and all of that. So I was doing this on the side. And then, I got the idea for this story and I happened to get it published. But I'm still doing my full time job in technology. So, yes.
Amazing.
I'm something of I kind of joke with Liz that I'm half a Luddite. I'm sort of intimidated by technology in general. I have a basic grasp on stuff, but beyond kind of the rudimentary, I do get a little bit flummoxed. So it's a very foreign world to me. But I wonder, is there crossover between the skill sets of programming and writing a book?
There's definitely some personality crossover because, for my full time job, I sit behind a desk and I write code, don't talk to people.
Right.
And then in my spare hours, I'm again sitting somewhere behind a screen, writing words, not talking to people. So I guess we can say people skills is something I do not have. Um, but more than that, I think the technology part, it helps if you're crafting a mystery novel, because in many ways it's like you're putting together a puzzle for the reader to solve, which
Right.
is a lot of what software programming tends to be about, because you have similar conventions like in a mystery novel. You have these genre rules that you have to follow, whereas in programming, depending on the programming language, you have the proper language constructs and syntax that you have to follow without getting too technical about it. But at the end of the day, I sometimes feel I'm still using the same parts of my brain for both the jobs.
Right. There is that problem solving aspect that,
Yes.
that
Yep.
through lines. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love both about your book, The Night of the Storm, and then the kind of conventions in a locked door mystery, which your book very much is, and I want to have you set it up a little bit is that there is definitely like this kind of math involved. There's a finite amount of time. There's a certain number of suspects. It's your book is a little tricky because we don't want to spoil anything, so we'll have to be obscuring in how we talk about it. But I wondered too how much of your coding and software kind of need to know about math translated to this book, because I thought that really shone through. It felt very like technically minded in moments. But if you wouldn't mind, could you just set up the kind of premise of the Night of the Storm, because it's so inspired, and I'm curious about that kind of light bulb moment when you came up with it.
Yeah, so The Night of the Storm, it's a locked room novel. It's about an Indian family who's trapped in a house during a hurricane, and then obviously someone gets murdered. I was inspired to write this story based on my own experience with Hurricane Harvey. When Harvey hit Texas, I was stuck in my apartment. I mean, I was safe because I was on the second story, but we were essentially trapped. And I had a bunch of family members coming over to my place to, ride out the storm. I mean, spoiler alert, nobody in the family was murdered. I feel
Good.
like I should call that out with this book. People would probably read it and go, oh my God, what is her family like? So thank God my family is very lovely. The characters are not inspired by my real family. I made sure to thank each one of them in the acknowledgements because I wanted to make sure they keep me uh, even after reading the book. But yeah, as soon as I went through that experience, I kind of had this light bulb moment of setting this locked room novel in the context of a hurricane, because I don't think that's been done before. We have novels in snowstorms, but hurricane is such a Texas specific thing that I wanted to, kind of explore that. And after the pandemic, I think we have all experienced the need to kill someone when you spend too much time with your family. So I think that's relatable.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago that your dad was very adamant about you being having a practical profession, before you veered off into your creative pursuit. Now that you have done both successfully and continue to, how does that? What has been your family's sort of reaction?
Yeah, they have honestly been super proud of it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you may want to read the book first before, but they're just like, and they live in India. So when they came over, they like took a stack of books back home to,
Mm.
proudly pass it on to their friends and family. And I told them, you guys, you may want to read this first. But yeah, they're super proud, and yeah, it's definitely been a very happy feeling to be able to experience this moment with them.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, you're bringing up a theme that has definitely come up in a number of our conversations, which is, very kind of well adjusted, kind hearted, sane people who even come from happy, lovely families who then kind of write about all of the opposites. And you have some very strong, interesting characters in this family. And I'm glad to hear they're not based on people in your actual family, but I would imagine that it was important for you to create these strong personalities in order to kind of ratchet up the tension. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, we love the family dynamic and you've got some great stuff. So, do you want to talk a little bit about why this particular configuration and how you chose each family member?
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted these people to experience some tension, so I had to make sure that they had unresolved issues so that the tensions would, rise up when they're forced to spend time together.
Mhm.
And it's funny, the story has these two sisters, right? Seema and Jia. But initially, they were not sisters. They were actually friends in my first draft of the book. But then the feedback I was getting was that this relationship is too toxic for it to work in real life. Like, I would not be friends with that person.
Mhm.
So then I thought, okay, what's a relationship wherein you have to spend time with each other, even if you don't really like each other? And that's family. So that's how I ended up making them sisters. So I was, kind of picking attributes from here and there from, some people I may have encountered. And my favorite character to write was Grandma.
Hmm.
So it was great.
because yeah, she's, as you get older, you kind of just say whatever you want, and she's absolutely at that point in her life where the filters between her mouth and her brain have like gone. So that was a fun character to write.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very well. She was fun to read too. She was great. I love
Yeah.
how I love it without ruining anything. I love how you kind of complete her character arc as well. It's a great story. It's very
Yeah.
good.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned grandma because one of the things, it's kind of a macro, aspect of your writing in this story is to write about kind of the family dynamics specifically within this kind of immigrant family. And you have some really wonderful moments where you kind of talk about the politics of marriage and what that brings. And part of that is living with your mother-in-law. And then the kind of, dynamic, the hierarchy in the house. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I thought, this is the first time I've ever seen that used in a mystery. And then it lends itself really well to kind of creating a caste system within the cast of characters. So I would love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, so they say that write what you know, right? And part of me is this background that I have and this knowledge that I have of Indian culture, which is, very specific, and it can be very different from what we have here in America, in the Western culture. And this culture persists even after people, leave their countries, and they've left their countries and moved here for 10 years, but they're still holding back on these traditional beliefs. I know families like that. So I kind of wanted to explore the experience of someone who is going through that while living in a country where, individual rights are supposedly prized so much. So I
Mhm.
kind of wanted to capture that Indian experience, and that's been the best part, because I have feedback from like people who didn't know about this culture before, and now they walk away knowing something they didn't know before. And I
Mm.
also get feedback from Indian readers who are so happy to see their experiences represented in a novel.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely learned a number of things. One of which is you point out that oftentimes what happens is with Indian immigrants, they will, when they arrive in the states, they will often replicate the Hindi caste system once they arrive. I thought that was a really fascinating dynamic. It lends, I mean, it lends itself great to a story and to a thriller, but also, I mean, it was just something I didn't realize that was something that was sort of brought over as well.
Mm.
Right. And
Um,
speaking of family dynamics, I think you guys did that great in the book Trust Issues. I mean, the banter between the brother and sister, and you can just tell, right? Like, oh, you can just tell, like, there's so much shared history between them, like, and they, even if they are like two completely different people, at the end of the day, they're going to be there for each other. So I think you guys captured that really
Thank you.
well.
Mm.
Well, to the point you brought up a few minutes ago, it really is, there is that pressure cooker situation when it's family members. The stakes are higher and the kind of the resentments linger longer, and there's more of that kind of backstory. So it really does, yeah, lends itself. We had a good time with that. As I was reading your book, I kind of thought of that. I was like, oh, right, it's, you really can get into the gristle of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, with this, I had read the book when it first came out, and then I reread it for this conversation. And what struck me about it is that a lot of the themes that you were exploring in the book when you wrote the book a couple of years ago, I realized upon the reread that they've only gotten probably more urgent and feel a lot more timely with kind of our current administration and everything like that. Did you have a sense going in of how prescient that was going to maybe be or continue to be?
No, honestly, no. I had no idea. If I had any inkling of the things that are gonna come, oh my God, I would make so many different decisions. No, but yes, I'm glad that the ideas presented in the book relating to immigration, and how people, especially in the legal immigration, they are stuck in that cycle for so many years, and people don't know that the complexities of just getting a visa. So hopefully those themes stay relevant to
Yeah,
audiences today.
yeah.
Mm. I wanted to ask you about what it was like to write I love the character of Gia, and she's our protagonist who's confronted with kind of layer upon layer obstacle, and really the pressure it gets ratcheted up for her. I think the most out of any of the characters. But one of the elements of how you built her out that I thought was really interesting was being a divorcee, within this family and then within this culture where you compare being a divorcee with being a childless couple or an unmarried woman. And, this kind of really reductive, simplifying aspect of this difficult time she's going through and continues to go through. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you layered that both as like a cultural commentary and also a plot device, because it really works on both levels.
Yeah, so definitely in India, there's this huge stigma associated with being divorced. So if I had to ask you guys, if you had to guess what is the divorce rate in India, what would you put that as a percentage? Just a ballpark.
I'm going to say 10%.
Less than 1%
Wow.
Wow.
in a country with a billion population.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? It does not mean that Indians have magically cracked the code on making marriages work, right?
Right.
All it means is that people are trapped in unhappy marriages because there's this, backlash associated to getting a divorce. I mean, things are changing now with women getting more educated, getting in the workforce. Things are improving, but there's still this, very rigid mentality. So I kind of wanted to explore that, basically the struggles that come along with being a divorced person, because regardless of the stigma, it is hard being a single mom. Like, single moms everywhere are my heroes.
Mhm.
Like, that is, I'm like, I have a wonderful husband helping me out, I have family support and everything, and yet I complain all the time about how hard this is.
Sure.
So imagine having to do all of that by yourself. Like, it's so hard, and we don't, societies in general don't support moms enough, especially single moms. So
Yeah.
kind of wanted to, yeah, use that.
Agreed. Yeah.
I love that. And also, talking about with that, minuscule number of divorce, and you said, beautifully that that's really the number of people who are trapped in marriages. I'm thinking how you have this character who's essentially liberated herself, but then she gets trapped in this situation. So there's so many kind of metaphoric layers that you've effectively presented to the reader about what it means to be like trapped in a situation and like how do you get out. And her maternal instinct throughout, was so powerful. Like it really just kind of kept coming back to the core of like, how do I protect my child? Which I think is always a brilliant plot motivator and device. But I always bring the conversation to this as a mother myself. Where were you in your motherhood journey when you were creating this story and writing it relative to now? And how much did that impact you writing from the voice of a mother?
Yeah, so when I was working on this novel, I was single and in many ways living the best life.
Yes.
But she can understand. But then, yeah, and then I got pregnant and I had this manuscript out with agents. But then once I had my baby, I pretty much forgot about writing or publishing. All of that went out the window. And in many ways, it kind of freed me up from that pressure to feel like I have to get published, because it was the first time in years when I truly did not care about the book or story, because I had like super important other things to look after. So I think the universe kind of, opened up to me once I let that go. And
Mm.
one night, I remember I was up at like 2 or 3 in the night, and there was an agent offer sitting in my inbox for a whole day that I hadn't even had time to look at.
Wow.
And yeah, things just went on from there. And it helped to have a young child while I was editing this book, because while it was difficult, I had to like wake up at 4:35 in the morning to get some writing done before my baby woke up. But for the first time, I truly understood what this unconditional love is that people keep talking about. So hopefully in the rewrite, I was able to make the bond between the mom and the son, become stronger. I mean, I think it also made my main character tired because that's how I was feeling. So I think that exhaustion came through in the
Yeah.
pages.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the and Liz just mentioned this, but I really also loved that very kind of fierce, protective, maternal bond that she has with her son in that. And one of the things, if you don't mind, I would love to just read a short passage from the book because I think it encapsulates this um, kind of one of the threads and one of the themes that you explore of this sort of societal misogyny so beautifully. And you're describing Indian culture. You say a country whose citizens ardently worshipped 1,000 goddesses and elected a female prime minister in the 80s had collectively decided that not being born would always be a more appealing option than being born female, which just really blew me away because you encapsulate that hypocrisy so beautifully. And then also within the story, a lot of it, Gia is also worrying about how these misogynist attitudes are going to then impact her son potentially. And so there's a lot of pushback for her character to really kind of try her best to navigate that with him. How did that theme sort of come to the forefront, I guess, as you were writing?
Yeah, so the gender disparity has always been something that has bothered me growing up, and I think it always surprises readers out here when they find out that in India you cannot legally disclose the gender of the unborn child because, based on the finding, the parents are less likely to want to continue,
Mm-hmm.
which is so sad. So no gender parties, no gender reveal parties for people in India,
Right.
because the medical professionals, they can't tell you if you're having a son or a daughter. And that just makes me so sad to think that, we've come to this stage where a government has to step in and make this rule, but it doesn't really solve the root cause, right? Which is, why is it so hard to be a woman in India? Why do parents feel that a female child is going to be a bigger burden than a male child? So I kind of wanted to explore that issue. And again, this is one of those things that you could move to another country which has a completely different mindset, but because these beliefs are so ingrained through generations of brainwashing, that even after coming here you're still going to feel this ridiculous happiness on finding out that you're having a boy, which is logically makes no sense, but you've just been wired that way. So
Well, one of the other things that you mentioned too, just as a quick follow up, I thought it was interesting. Grandma watches a Hindi soap opera, and you describe how that is like this very toxic feedback loop, and and I'm always interested when writers are writing that kind of things into their stories, where they're exploring how the sort of the societal issues are baked into the media and the cultural staples. If you could maybe tell our listeners a little more about that, I thought that was interesting as well.
yeah, so I grew up watching those shows, and at the time I didn't think too much about it, but now that I rewatch them, I realize how regressive they are, because they always show the women are always in the house, they're always homemakers, and there's always drama over something, and there are these power struggles between them. So it kind of reinforces the limits of what a woman can do in society, right? So yes, and again, I don't know who is causing what, whether it's the audiences that are following the media, or the media is taking the cue from what the audience is like, but it's like a feedback loop.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm just thinking, riffing on the kind of show within the book, is the kind of larger than life characters are that you have in each of these players. There's kind of like a moral ambiguity in them, and I love how you've put them in this situation where there's such an outsized, literally there's the hurricane outside, and they're in kind of a life and death situation, which really ramps up people's best and worst behavior. So I was wondering, how did you like toggle that so that it wasn't like they were soap opera characters? Like, how did you keep that realistic, but still kind of have the largeness of these, characters and their decision making?
Right. So I hopefully tried to balance their unlikable qualities with
Mhm.
some elements that made them redeemable, or if not redeemable, at least understandable. So
Mm.
you have this character Vipul, who's, this domineering husband who just expects his wife to, serve him food and take care of him. But at the same time, he's also this elder son who wants attention from his mom, who doesn't want his mom to think that his younger brother is her favorite. So, I try to put qualities like that into every character so
Mm.
that you see their bad behavior, but hopefully you also get a glimpse into some of their internal pain, which is driving some of that behavior.
Well, I
Yeah.
think, and you did a good job in this of taking those family dynamics and even with the sort of bad behavior or the more, let's say, bad behaved characters. I think it's you can the reader can sort of empathize with them on that level because a lot of that behavior really comes from these either familial or societal expectations that have been kind of thrust upon them. So everyone's sort of at the mercy of that at some level. And I think that makes it a really compelling dynamic in a story as well.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I was wondering, Nishita, what your I know you said you were a book lover growing up, and I'm sure that has sustained through your life. Were you always kind of drawn to this genre, and were you influenced, I would expect, by, Agatha Christie or Ruth Rendell, Sophie Hannah, like authors of that nature? Yeah, tell us a little bit about your origins of reading to writing.
Mm.
Yeah, so definitely Agatha Christie, the classics are one of my many inspirations that I've drawn on for this novel. But even in the contemporary space, we have so many writers, and, Gone Girl is like the ultimate favorite. Like, I'm still hunting for that book that will give me, that feeling when I read it for the first time. So
Yes.
those are some of my influences. But yes, I have always navigated to this genre, and I feel like there's so much people can do within the mystery construct, right? Like, this has so much potential for social commentary, and those are the books that I like. But
Yeah.
in the mystery is the central part, but then there's a lot of all of this commentary going on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is that you've done for your debut? You did sort of the subgenre of the locked door mystery. Do you have other for future projects, are there other sort of subgenres of the thriller space that you are locked into that you want to do, or are you kind of free flowing?
Right now, it's pretty free flowing, but I am interested in something about tech. So we'll see. I work in tech, so I figured, and it's everywhere now
Right.
for mostly bad reasons.
Right.
And I, as a participant in that industry, am well aware of its flaws and, the ways it can mess up people's lives.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to hopefully explore that in my future works, but we'll
Okay.
see.
Yeah, we're going to hold you to that. You need to write a tech thriller because I think that tech thrillers are awesome, but also they should be written by people who actually know tech.
Right.
um, I'm just wondering where the imposter of it all is in your
Mm.
story because I think I can make assumptions, but do you experience imposter syndrome as a writer? You have a debut novel and this is not what you've been doing all along necessarily, or at least out in the open. So that's my guess, but tell us.
Absolutely. And honestly, I have like thumb damage from the times I was refreshing Goodreads when the book first was out there, and just that journey of coming to that acceptance stage
Yeah.
Yeah.
wherein I can just, read the reviews without it being an attack on my soul.
Mm, yeah.
So that can definitely put you in a lot of self doubt, right? When someone could question, how did this get published? And I'm sitting there like, yeah, I know. I'm also asking the same question.
Oh.
What's been to put a positive spin on that sometimes soul crushing Goodreads experience that we all have fallen into? What has been maybe your favorite experience or your favorite part of the kind of publishing experience as a debut?
This has been my favorite part. This talking to other writers, being part of this community. And like Liz was mentioning before, honestly, murder writers, And writers in the thriller space, they are the nicest people around. I don't know what it is, but they are so supportive. So I have been very lucky to be able to connect it to writers such as yourself, and feel very uplifted. And when I was going through this debut journey, we had this writing Slack group set up with
Mm.
all the writers. So
Mhm.
we were basically, everybody, all the clueless people together, trying to go on this journey together. So that's been helpful.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's, one of the best parts of this job is the community and connecting with other writers and just reaffirming that it doesn't get easier. And, it also, I think, offsets this tendency. I'll speak for myself to assume that other writers are having an easier, better, happier time of it just based on what I'm seeing, online. And I just a little bit wanted to talk about the Goodreads, experience because I think it's something that we've touched on, but it's really powerful, and I think it can be dangerous, especially early on. And I think that's like the rub of it because when you are a debut, I know when we were doing The Woman Inside, Goodreads felt like that kind of dopamine fix to feel like something was happening with the book.
Yes.
Um, but it's almost like going to your enemy's house, when you need like an uplift. It's just it whatever it is about it, whether it's people who wanted to be writers and it didn't work out, people who just hate writers, I don't know. It My experience is it's always been really negative, but conversely, the positive parts of it I've noticed are other writers really supporting each other, trying to almost like balance it out.
Mhm.
So I guess my question in all of that is, has it gotten easier for you to read potentially negative feedback or neutral feedback, or have you stopped looking, or what has kind of been your self-care around that?
Yeah, so it has taken me a while to come to this place where I can be totally like chill about it. Like I can tell you some, and now I even laugh along with the reviews. What helps is to kind of just remind yourself again that it's a place, it's originally set up as a place for readers to talk about books. I don't think the person writing the review is necessarily thinking about the author who's also reading it and then, is going to think about it all of next week. It's just, readers talking about the books that, the experience that they had. And not every book is for everyone. Because even we as writers, we might see a book out there that we love get a negative review and be like, why does this have a low rating? We love this book. So not every book is for everyone. You just have to slowly come to a place of detachment, but it's been slow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I hear you on that. Well, speaking of, sort of a not a reader community, but an author community. How do you find community for yourself? Do you have? I know you're in Texas. Do you have sort of a local, like a writers group you're in, or just a network of authors, or is that more, you're seeing people maybe at writers conferences? How have you kind of been able to build that?
Yeah, so my favorite place to go to is my local bookstore, Murder by the Book.
Oh,
And
yeah,
they,
I love that.
yeah, it's a really good store. They have like all the authors, they come out from different states. So you get to network with different authors, living across the country. So that's been really helpful. And what I try to do is when a local author, needs a conversation partner, I'll happily go in and, have a chat. And that's how you build that community, kind of,
Mm.
pass it on what was given to you. So that helps. And then, Instagram, you connect to, and then you have pub siblings. And I was lucky to get a chance to blurb y'all's book. So,
Yeah.
that has helped.
Thank you for that, by the way.
I do appreciate that, Blair. It was great. This sounds like a perfect time to actually give you a little bit of one of our imposter stories
Mm.
that took place at Murder by the Book. Um,
Right.
when the Woman Inside came out, we ended up doing a kind of a small tour, and I think our third stop maybe was Murder by the Book, and we were
Mm.
supposed to do it with a Houston author, and they ended up there was like a family emergency. They couldn't make it, so it was just the two of us. We were debuts. No one knew who we were. we show up there, and it's two of us because we write together, and we had one person in the audience, not counting the people who work in the store, right? So we end up, Liz. So we're
And
standing.
it was raining. Don't forget, it was like raining,
It
right?
was raining. I mean,
Yeah.
the weather was not doing us any favors. But like when the authors in this case outnumber the number of people in the crowd, it's a humbling moment. But Liz had the great idea of like, she's like, you know what, let's get out from behind the podium and we'll just sit down. And we ended up having this wonderful conversation with this woman, Amy, who's, like a reader and was super enthusiastic. And we still, she'll still occasionally reach out on Instagram and ask like if we're coming to Houston anytime soon. So it does build, sometimes in the most sort of unexpected places, you really can build community. I think in this life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that has
it's
happened to me too, by the way, the audience outnumbering the host. And I had traveled to Austin. So,
Uh,
so after that, I was like, I'm going to rethink my travel plan.
well, what's interesting to me is at the top of the show, you talked about, the parallels of, your day job and your passion job, writing and being, behind a desk and not dealing with people. Interacting with people, I should say. So to me, that suggests there's a certain degree of introversion in your personality. But it's really great to hear that you've been kind of like you were being proactive about doing in conversation with authors coming through your hometown. You're going out, you're meeting authors, you're connecting. Do, so do you kind of share both traits? Do you enjoy the isolation and the writing of it all? Do you enjoy the promoting? Like, where is your kind of sweet spot?
So I think I enjoy the interacting and the talking when it's like-minded people, right? So like when I know this other person is also someone who has chosen for some reason to sit for hours by herself, because putting out a book is not something that a regular person would want to do, right? Dedicating years of this to, put words on a page that you don't even know will see the light of day. So
Yeah.
so that part I like when it's, talking to folks such as yourself or other writers. The part that I do struggle with is the social media promotion. Like if
Mhm.
you had to, make videos of yourself just like talking, that
Yeah.
I wish I were good at it. Let's just say I have a lot of respect for people, who have those skills. Like they talk and then some other text comes up on the screen, like they point at that is like magic to me. I'm in tech, but I have never been able to make that work. So I
Yeah.
initially when we started talking about like marketing, I went on TikTok because I was very hopeful that I'll go viral on TikTok and build a fan base or something. But a bajillion hours later, there was zero content that I had put out on TikTok.
Mm.
But I had watched so many videos that I had to stop. I had to like, get away from it because then the DNA, like the algorithm was in my DNA. Like it knew things about me I didn't know.
well, that sounds like fertile ground for the tech thriller that you're originally going to write. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
Maybe.
right there. I'm actually sort of curious now. It's occurring to me, now that you've written and you mentioned there was a little bit of crossover in the skill set from programming to plotting out and kind of building out this framework and structure for a novel. Having done that, do you find that anything you've learned from the writing process, are you able to bring that back to programming, where like maybe it helps troubleshoot or it helps you think outside the box in terms of how you might go like address a tech problem?
That's a really great question. I think patience, publishing teaches you patience. Like when you have to wait 2+ years
Yeah,
to see something get published, it teaches you patience. And you see the technology and publishing, they are like completely opposite. Like technology moves fast, right? But
right.
publishing is the opposite. So it just teaches you to slow down and do things right. You don't always have to move fast. You can, slow down and take time to do things right. So that's what I've learned from publishing.
Okay.
Mm. I love that reframe. It's patience,
Yeah.
and I kind of always felt like publishing taught me impatience, but I'm gonna I'm gonna borrow from you and take the positive spin. But you know, this is making me think about pacing. And one of the things I think you do so well in your book is create this very propulsive, you know, momentum within the story that, you know, as a reader, it's really gratifying because it moves very quickly and you're kind of feeling all of the storm, metaphoric and literal. And I'm wondering, do you find that in your writing experience, pacing kind of comes naturally? Is that something you have to go back and look at and kind of make sure it's all squaring up?
Yeah, it does not come naturally. It comes through in the rewrites with the help of, wonderful editors and my agent who looks things over. Because
Mm.
sometimes, there are things I want to say which feel important to me, but then, they take away from the story. So I need someone with an outside perspective to come and tell me, like, hey, this is slowing things down. So definitely pacing is not one of my strong suits.
Mm.
How do you guys balance doing that, especially with two writers writing? That's so interesting.
Mm.
Mm. It's, you know, definitely, I think Greg writes naturally, you know, more kind of like taught economically. I think he edits more as he goes compared to where I want to. I think I'm relating to you a lot in that, like, I have a lot I want to say and I want to say it all. So, you know, I think having a partner who tends to write the way Greg does actually helps me because it's really easy to see the unevenness if I'm like having a really wordy, heavy chapter versus his very kind of tight and taut
Mhm.
chapter. So it's a little bit of like a safeguard, I think. And then, you know, of course, agent, editor, you know, beta readers is so important. But yeah, I had kind of a secondary thought, Greg. I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you answer just yet
Go for it.
because one of the things in your bio that stuck out to me that I loved is that you really, you know, enjoy writing about women and the immigrant experience. And what I think is remarkable is that you have a lot of socioeconomic commentary baked into a really, you know, propulsive, fast moving story. And I think those are kind of two opposites if they're not done well. So, you know, this is something that Greg and I really enjoy is kind of baking in some social commentary, but it can become unwieldy if you don't keep it like in the pacing of the story itself. So, you know, I guess the question is a little bit adding on to what you just answered, but what kind of weighs more heavily when you're in the writing process? Is it's like, I want to get this kind of messaging in, or I want to keep the pace going, you know, or are you even conscious of it?
I think for me, the story is number one. Like the you should come for the entertainment and then stay for the message.
Mm.
For me, so story is everything. I am a reader first, and I always look for something that's entertaining, wherein I should be lost in the story, and I should, get the messaging as a side piece. So I don't start off with, oh, this is what I want to talk about. It's
Mm-hmm.
more to let the characters go through, and hopefully the characters' backgrounds and the events that happen in their past, they lend themselves to this commentary.
So
That's great.
do you sort of, when you do go in at the outset of the story, when you say, okay, this is sort of roughly the story I want to tell, I mean, do you have any of those themes sort of at front of mind, or do the themes really develop as the characters develop into the story? How much is, or maybe it's a blend.
For me, the themes emerge organically. I am not even thinking about the theme when I'm writing the story. It's just that when I look at the big picture, when I'm done with the draft and I take a bird eye view, I'm able to see, oh, this is what I'm really trying to. So it's
Right.
more like excavating the story from myself, like, oh, this is what I really want to say, and things that may have been bubbling in my mind for years might come subconsciously through on the page. So yeah, it's not something that I'm conscious of when I'm writing.
So the novel really is the delivery system for all the stuff that you're ruminating
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I love that. I've never heard it described quite that way, but kind of excavating the story that you want to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Greg, I totally jumped all over. So
That's okay.
feel free to answer Nishita's question about how we balance. See, even I won't let him answer in a succinct way because I have too many things I want to get out.
You see what I have to work with here? No, I think, I mean, Liz, I think you're absolutely right. Part of having, um, a writing partner is that you do balance each other out. And as Liz mentioned, she tends to like, we kind of say, it's like she kind of overwrites, I underwrite, and then we meet in the middle. So it's like the manuscript that we eventually come out with, it's like the third bowl of porridge in the Goldilocks thing, right? It's like just the right temp. And so that kind of is how it's, I guess, how we do it. And also because I think in terms of the pacing, it helps because we're kicking chapters back and forth all the time. So there's a natural propulsion that is sort of inherent in that. And we're reading each other's stuff, and we don't really, we map it out pretty loosely. So we don't really know where it's going to go entirely. And that helps too, because you're engaged as a reader. And so you're kind of, that's keeping the pace of the story up as you're taking it in to figure out how you're going to kind of answer the previous chapter as well. So.
Ah, that's fascinating. And I love how it all comes together, because when you see the finished product, you don't get that jarring experience that it's two different people. It's such a unified flow that, I feel like I'm reading just one voice. So I think you guys did
No,
a great job there.
Yeah, appreciate
thank
that.
you. Thank you so much. This has been kind of kicking around my head since the start of the podcast, just because I really want to commiserate with you guys as writers. But Nishita, I'm curious about your experience with this. Right now, I'm working on something, and when I'm not working on it actively, when I'm playing with my son or I'm doing chores around the house, the story and the characters are constantly talking to me. And if I don't get down, some words a day, it gets really loud and really, really crazy. And I'm wondering if you two hear those voices, and how that, motivates you. Do you have to write every day? Like what that looks like for you now that you've got one book out? Are you currently working on something? So that's a bunch of questions, kind of all related.
Yeah, so I'm definitely like you. Like I will have ideas marinating in my head, while I'm doing. And mothering gives you a lot of opportunities wherein you just want your mind to go in a different place, right? Like
Yeah.
you're doing laundry, or, you're doing the dishes. So there's plenty of time to let the story ideas form. But I think that helps, that because that's almost like a pre-process that you do, so that by the time you come to your screen and your keyboard, you're not really scared of what you're going to write if you already have some inkling of where you want to go. So then that makes you less scared of that blank document if you come in with some ideas that have already formed. So that's my process. But do I write every day? I absolutely not. I don't. There is no schedule. There is only chaos. I have learned to embrace the chaos. The writing comes when it comes. Sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes it's on weekends, but I just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Do you find, because you have a lot of sort of other um, responsibilities and things like that, do you find when you are able to grab a bit of time to sit down, at that point does it flow pretty well? I mean, do you have that kind of store of things that you've been wanting to talk about, and it comes out reasonably, it flows reasonably well?
Yes, yes, I feel that the more time that I take, this all this work that's happening in my mind subconsciously, it definitely helps to bring the words on the page. I mean, the words are still bad, but that's okay. That's what revisions are for.
For
But
sure.
words appear on the page, yes.
Like half the battle.
Well, I wanted to go back to the night of the storm, and the kind of literal and metaphoric use of the storm, and that like nature element. Are you drawn to write about other kind of elements as a spine for a story? I know you mentioned the techno thriller potentially, but I think there's so much you can work with the natural world as metaphor. So is there anything else that's been kind of appealing to you? I'm really in like a water fire phase right now.
Ah, yeah, I wish. I think I was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time, wherein I got to experience that hurricane from a safe distance to be able to write about it. But apart from that, I am such a non-nature person. Like I read those books about, those hikes that people go on and then somebody gets lost, and I want to write that. But I have to take that hike to be able to experience that. And there's no exercise happening in my home right now. So
Yeah, I understand.
But I can write a book about sleep deprivation. I am a subject matter expert on.
Deprivation. I mean, you could go into a kind of a horror thing. We could do kind of like a Nightmare on Elm Street reboot,
Hmm.
Yeah.
sleep deprivation, and
So much you can do with sleep
almost
deprivation.
yeah. I mean, I'm a passive observer more or less in this, but you two, I think, could be you're keyed right in. Sheila, so we know that obviously you have a predilection for thrillers. Are you what is kind of your reading diet, so to speak, outside of thriller stuff? Are you reading, broadly? Is it sort of in more or less in that lane?
No, I do. Yeah, I do like to read broadly, even if thrillers are my favorite genre. Right now, I'm reading Careless People. It's written by one of Facebook's executives, and it makes for a fascinating read. So I would highly recommend
Mm.
it to our listeners. And
Okay,
when I'm looking for something light, I'll go back to my Bridget Jones and
mhm,
Sophie Kinsella. Just the light-hearted contemporary when I just need a laugh.
sure.
Mm.
And do you find that you bring things from outside of the thriller genre maybe into your writing process when you are working on thrillers?
Absolutely, because every novel, regardless of genre, has things to teach about character development and dialogue writing and how to keep the momentum going. So I think you can learn from any novel that you read. Yeah.
Mm. Well, with our last few minutes, I'm just wondering, there's so much that you covered in this novel. Was there one particular kind of theme or message or feeling you were hoping that readers would take away from it? And if so, what was that?
It was just respect for single moms and more insights into the struggles that they go through,
Mm.
and more knowledge of Indian culture and immigrants specifically, like an insider look at what an immigrant family looks like.
Mhm. You did it
Yeah.
beautifully. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of takeaways that I felt were really fascinating and enlightening. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for tucking it into a very propulsive, heart pounding novel.
Yes.
The
Well,
best way to learn.
it's been such a pleasure sharing this time with you, Nishita, and we hope that whatever you do next, you'll come on and talk with us about. In the meantime, I hope all of our listeners get a copy of The Night of the Storm, and when they do, they love it and they post positive things on Goodreads about it. And how can people reach you and find you out in the world?
They can find me on Instagram. My handle is Nishida, my first name underscore author. That's the best way to reach me. Yes.
Okay. Well,
And
Wonderful.
my book is sold in all the bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, libraries.
mm,
If you don't want to pay for the book, that's totally fine. You can always ask your local library to get a copy.
okay.
And these are also all places where you can also get Trust Issues, a
Oh,
book that I really enjoyed reading and had the opportunity to read early. So thank you.
thank you, and thank you for
Thank
being so
you.
generous with your time today and with your reading time to Blur. Yeah, we love the conversation. Thank you for coming on, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank
And
you.
I will just take us out. Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg is created and hosted by us, Elizabeth Keenan and Greg Wands. The show is produced and edited by Bookwild Collective founder Kate Harrogate. And Scott Leeds composed our original theme music, and Steve Loma designed our logo.
And you can find us on IG at Imposter Hour Podcast and online at Imposter